The Soviets once classified this as a state secret. American universities buried the research. Yet farmers who use a single copper wire in their soil are harvesting up to 3 times more than their neighbors for about $12. This method was deleted from agriculture textbooks and dismissed as pseudoscience, even though Cornell University and others confirmed it works. They just never told you why it disappeared. The forgotten copper, wire secret copper, is an essential micronutrient for photosynthesis, enzyme activity, and respiration. When bare copper wire sits in soil, it slowly releases ions that boost microbial life and improve nutrient uptake. Some researchers believe it also strengthens the plant's own electrical signaling, helping roots, stems, and leaves communicate and grow more efficiently. The effect is simple and repeatable: faster growth, larger yields, stronger disease resistance, and longer storage life, using cheap hardware store wire that works for years with a single installation. In the 1930s, agricultural textbooks openly recommended threading copper through carrot beds. By the 1970s, that advice was gone. Internal industry memos labeled copper techniques a market threat to synthetic fertilizers. Too simple, too cheap, and impossible to patent. If you can't sell it, you don't promote it. And within a generation, it vanished from mainstream practice. Let's break down exactly what copper does for specific vegetables and how to apply it. The tomato. The doubled overnight tomatoes respond dramatically to copper. Wrap bare copper wire around tomato cages just above the soil line. Within 2 weeks, plants show noticeably darker, thicker leaves. Fruit ripens a full week earlier with a deeper red color and heavier weight. Copper enhances microbial activity in the root zone, improving nutrient uptake. It also supports chlorophyll production, which explains the darker foliage. The increased chlorophyll means more efficient photosynthesis, which translates directly into more energy for fruit production. Experienced tomato growers who have tried this method report not just larger harvests, but better tasting tomatoes. The enhanced nutrient uptake means more sugars and acids develop in the fruit, creating that complex, rich flavor that supermarket tomatoes lack. The copper also seems to help plants recover faster from stress, whether from heat waves, irregular watering, or pest pressure. The technique requires no special skills. Use 14 to 18 gauge bare copper wire from any hardware store. Wrap 3 to 5 coils around each cage at soil level. Leave the wire in place all season. One spool covers an entire garden for under $15. The wire can be reused for multiple years, making the actual cost per season almost negligible. The carrot trick. They pulled from textbooks. Carrots benefit from copper threading, a technique documented across multiple states before it disappeared from extension guides. Lay thin copper wire in shallow trenches alongside carrot rows, buried about 1 inch below the surface. The wire stays in place all season. Some gardeners prefer to run the wire directly down the center of the row, while others find that parallel wires on either side work equally well. Results are consistent across soil types. Carrots grow straighter with fewer splits and deformities. They taste noticeably sweeter, especially varieties prone to bitterness in heavier clay soils. Roots develop a deeper orange color. Tops stay healthier longer, indicating strong nutrient flow from soil to plant. The improved root development also means carrots reach harvestable size faster, often cutting a week or more off the typical growing time. Copper supports beneficial soil bacteria that make nutrients more available to root crops. This explains both the improved flavor and the better root development. The technique works particularly well in alkaline soils where nutrient availability is often limited. In these challenging soil conditions, copper can make the difference between a mediocre harvest and an exceptional one. The lettuce experiment. No one could explain. Lettuce shows dramatic response to copper treatment. University studies from the 1960s documented 40% larger heads when copper wire grids were buried 3 inches below planting beds. The research was filed away and never published because, as one researcher noted, there was no funding to explore something you can't sell. This pattern repeated across multiple institutions, with promising results consistently shelved rather than shared with the public. The copper-treated lettuce showed thicker leaves, deeper green color, and tighter head formation. Chlorophyll levels tested significantly higher. The leaves were crisper, less prone to wilting, and showed better resistance to aphids and leaf spot. In taste tests, the copper-grown lettuce was consistently preferred for its texture and flavor intensity. To replicate this, create a grid of copper wire spaced 6 inches apart, buried 3 inches deep before planting. Use bare copper wire, not coated. The wire can remain in place for multiple seasons as it slowly breaks down and enriches the soil. This grid system works particularly well for intensive gardening methods, where every square foot needs to produce maximum yields. If you're learning something the textbooks deleted, hit the like button. It helps more gardeners find this information that the industry doesn't want to spread. Why cucumbers loved the lightning rod? Cucumbers planted near copper sources consistently outperform those grown without. Old farmers noticed that vines near copper lightning rods grew faster, produced earlier, and tasted crisper. This observation held true across enough farms that it became standard practice before chemical agriculture took over. The farmers didn't understand the science, but they trusted their observations and their results. Copper influences water regulation and enzyme activation in cucumbers. These plants move large amounts of water from roots to leaves to fruit. Copper helps manage that flow more efficiently, keeping cells hydrated and firm. It also activates enzymes that affect flavor compounds, reducing bitterness. The bitter compounds in cucumbers develop as a stress response, and copper-treated plants experience less stress overall. For application, bury copper wire in a circle around cucumber hills, or along rows, about 2 inches deep. Alternatively, wrap copper wire around trellises or supports. Use about 3 feet of wire per plant. The wire can also be woven through the trellis netting, providing copper contact as the vines climb and spread. The pepper grower who buried pennies. Peppers respond to copper with increased yields, better disease resistance, and enhanced flavor compounds. Commercial growers have documented 35% yield increases using pre-1982 pennies buried around seedlings. These older pennies contain 95% copper, unlike modern pennies, which are mostly zinc. This makes vintage pennies a convenient and inexpensive copper source for gardeners. Place 3 or 4 pre-1982 pennies per plant, pressed into soil about 2 inches from the stem. Alternatively, use copper wire coiled around the base of each plant. Some growers combine both methods, using pennies at planting time and adding wire coils as plants mature. Copper affects capsaicin production in hot peppers, resulting in more concentrated heat. It also influences pigment development, producing deeper colors in both sweet and hot varieties. Plants show fewer signs of bacterial spot and blossom end rot. The strengthened cell walls that copper promotes help peppers resist both disease and physical damage during handling. Drop a comment below and tell me which vegetable you're trying this on first. Tomatoes, peppers, or something else. I want to know what's growing in your garden. The bean row that refuse to rust beans benefit greatly from copper's natural antifungal properties, often in ways that shock gardeners the first time they see it. During rust fungus outbreaks, beans grown with copper wire wrapped around their poles remained healthy and green, while neighboring crops completely collapsed into brown, infected vines. How does one simple wire make that big a difference? The copper releases trace ions that disrupt fungal spore germination before infection can establish. In other words, the disease never gets its foothold. This provides protection without any chemical spraying, making it ideal for organic gardeners and anyone trying to avoid constant fungicide use. The setup is almost laughably simple. Wrap copper wire loosely around bean poles from ground level up about 3 feet. You can use salvaged electrical wire or new wire from hardware stores, both work. As the season goes on, the wire slowly weathers to a green color. Many gardeners mistake this as ruined copper, but here's the twist. That green patina is actually copper oxide, and it still works. It continues to release beneficial ions into the surrounding environment all season long. The payoff is that this technique works against multiple fungal diseases, not just rust. Copper has been used as a fungicide for over a century, but the wire method changes the game. Instead of harsh periodic spraying, you get slow, continuous release right where the plants need it. That steady, low-level protection is often more effective than occasional high-dose applications because it stops infections from ever establishing. Once you've seen your beans stay clean while the rest of the patch gets hammered by disease, that thin strand of copper starts to look a lot less like scrap and a lot more like insurance. The squash secret in Soviet greenhouses. Squash production doubles with copper mesh placed under transplants. Soviet agricultural scientists documented this during the Cold War, then classified the results because agricultural advantages translated to economic power. Food production was a strategic concern, and any technique that could increase yields was considered valuable intelligence. Their experiments showed that squash plants grown over copper mesh produced twice as many female flowers, set fruit earlier, and kept producing weeks longer than control groups. The plants achieved a near-perfect fruit set, even with limited pollinator activity. Something about the copper affected plants at a hormonal level, triggering reproductive responses that normally required ideal conditions. This meant more squash from fewer plants, with less dependence on weather and pollinators. Use fine copper mesh, similar to window screening, laid directly on soil before transplanting. The mesh can be reused for multiple seasons. Cut pieces, slightly larger than the expected root spread of mature plants to ensure full coverage during the entire growing season. The onion farmer who rewired his rows. Onions grown with copper wire develop better sweetness, longer storage life, and almost zero rot. The technique is simple. Run a single strand of copper wire down each row, buried 2 inches deep. Cover with soil, plant sets on top, and let nature work. The copper integrates into the soil ecosystem, enhancing conditions for the entire growing season. Copper influences sulfur compounds in onions, the same compounds that determine sweetness versus sharpness. It also strengthens cell walls, which explains extended storage life. Onions grown this way stayed firm through February, while untreated onions showed rot by December. For gardeners who grow storage onions, this can mean enjoying homegrown produce for months longer. 1 spool of wire covers 6 rows. Total investment, $12 per season. When you calculate the extended storage life and reduced losses, the return on investment becomes substantial. Why spinach thrived on salvaged wire. Spinach responds to copper with darker leaves, higher chlorophyll content, and better nutrient density. During the Great Depression, gardeners who salvaged copper wire and coiled it around spinach beds grew some of the most nutritious food the country had seen. Necessity drove innovation, and those hard times preserved knowledge that prosperity later forgot. Copper plays a crucial role in iron absorption, which spinach depends on for deep color and nutrient content. It also supports chlorophyll formation. The result is more nourishing food, not just larger plants. Nutritional testing of copper-grown spinach shows measurably higher levels of iron, vitamins, and antioxidants compared to conventionally grown spinach. Coil copper wire loosely around the perimeter of spinach patches or weave it between rows. The technique extends the growing season, with copper-treated spinach continuing to produce after frost, while untreated greens wither and fade. This cold tolerance alone makes the technique valuable for gardeners in northern climates. The radish riddle from France. Radishes mature faster and taste better with copper strips buried alongside seeds. French market gardeners in the 1800s produced radishes so perfect that competitors accused them of cheating. Their secret was copper strips buried in shallow channels parallel to seed rows. These Parisian growers dominated the market for generations, using techniques they carefully guarded. Radishes came up in 3 weeks instead of 4. Roots were perfectly round, smooth-skinned, and brilliantly colored. Most importantly, they stayed crisp and mild even as they sized up, avoiding the woody bitterness common in larger radishes. This meant a longer harvest window and more flexibility in timing. Copper supports cell division and strengthens tissue structure during root formation. It also regulates compounds that cause bitterness. The faster maturity combined with extended harvest quality makes copper-enhanced radishes significantly more productive than conventional plantings. The cabbage. The blight cabbage gains surprising disease protection from a simple trick: copper wire coiled around transplant roots. When clubroot disease swept through farming regions, wiping out entire fields, the cabbages protected by copper stayed green and vigorous while neighboring farms lost almost everything. Imagine watching your neighbor's crop collapse while yours keeps standing. The disease can persist in soil for years, making prevention far more effective than any after-the-fact treatment. Here's the tiny step that makes that huge difference. Wrap 3 loose coils of copper wire around the root ball before transplanting. It looks almost too simple, but that's exactly why most growers overlook it. The copper creates a protective zone around the roots, releasing ions that suppress the slime mold responsible for clubroot. This targeted application puts the copper exactly where protection is needed most, right at the infection point. This doesn't sterilize the entire field or magically erase pathogens. Instead, it shields each plant at its most vulnerable stage. The payoff is hard to ignore. Cabbages forming solid, dense heads while surrounding farms plow under devastated plantings. For commercial growers, this tiny coil of wire can mean the difference between profit and bankruptcy in a bad disease year. And once you've seen the side-by-side results, it's almost impossible to go back. The potato patch that never got scab. Potatoes benefit from copper wire wrapped around seed potatoes before planting. This prevents scab, a disease that creates rough patches making potatoes unmarketable. The copper creates a protective barrier right where new tubers form, releasing antimicrobial ions that keep scab bacteria away. Wrap each seed potato with a single strand of thin copper wire, like giving it a belt. Not tight enough to damage the flesh, just snug enough to stay in place. Plant wire and all. The wire slowly breaks down, enriching soil with trace copper for future crops. This gradual release continues to benefit the soil long after harvest. This method produces smooth, clean potatoes without chemical seed treatments. The cosmetic improvement alone can double the marketable value of a potato harvest. The beet grower, who listened to Tesla beets grow sweeter, develop deeper color, and store longer when grown inside copper coils. Bury copper wire wound into loose coils about 6 inches deep around beet rows, running the coils the length of the bed. Space them so each row sits inside a gentle copper ring that can stay in the soil for multiple seasons. The coils create what one farmer called energy rings. The description may sound mystical, but the results are measurable and repeatable. Beets grown this way showed higher betanin content, the compound responsible for deep red color. They tasted sweeter with no pale streaks or woody texture, and the color was noticeably richer even after cooking. Most significantly, they stored through winter without shriveling, while untreated beets became rubbery by December. The cellular integrity that copper promotes helps beets maintain quality, flavor, and firmness in storage. Copper affects cellular structure in ways that help beets retain moisture and resist decay. It supports stronger cell walls and better internal water balance. This structural improvement translates to better texture when eaten fresh, more juicing quality, and longer viability in storage. The corn row that outgrew the rest. Sweet corn shows dramatic height and yield differences with copper wire buried beneath rows. A single strand has produced corn up to 12 inches taller than identical varieties in the same soil without copper. Stalks grow thicker and stay upright in the wind with broader, darker leaves. Ears form earlier and fill to the tips with fewer gaps. Stronger stalks also mean less lodging during storms and lower harvest losses. Copper activates enzymes that help corn move sugars, build proteins, and develop structural strength. For a heavy feeder like corn, that boost sends more energy into developing ears, creating larger, more fully developed cobs. To use it, bury bare copper wire about 2 inches deep along each row. One continuous strand per row works better than segments, and the wire can be left in place to benefit future crops. In the 1970s, university trials tested copper across dozens of vegetables. Copper-grown plants almost always outperformed controls. They grew faster, yielded more, resisted disease better, and stored longer. The data was clean, the methods cheap, and the implications enormous. Then, nothing happened. No farmer outreach, no extension bulletins. The studies went into filing cabinets while researchers moved on to projects that could attract funding. By then, agriculture had committed to chemical fertilizers, patented seeds, and proprietary sprays. Copper wire didn't fit that model. You couldn't brand it, license it, or turn it into a recurring purchase. It was too simple, too accessible, and too permanent, so it was quietly ignored. Here's how to implement copper in your garden. For row crops like carrots, onions, and beets, bury a single strand of copper wire along each row, 1 to 2 inches deep. For cage plants like tomatoes, wrap wire around cages at soil level. For transplants like cabbage and peppers, coil wire around root balls before planting. For beds, create a grid of wire spaced about 6 inches apart, buried 3 inches deep. Use 14 to 18 gauge bare copper wire, not coated or insulated. Pre-1982 pennies work for individual plants, copper mesh suits, squash and melons. Old copper pipes or electrical scraps can be cut and buried for larger areas. The wire lasts multiple seasons and slowly enriches soil as it breaks down. A 100-foot spool under $15 can cover a substantial garden and pay for itself many times over in improved yields and reduced losses. If you know a gardener tired of spending hundreds on fertilizers that don't deliver, share this with them. $12 of copper wire might change their harvest. This science was never forbidden, just forgotten. A spool of copper costs less than a bag of fertilizer, and the knowledge is waiting in the soil for anyone willing to try. Every garden that uses these techniques becomes a small act of rebellion against an industry that profits from your dependence. $12, 3 times the harvest, 0 chemicals. If you want more secrets the agricultural industry deleted, subscribe and like this video so you don't miss what's coming next.